The lobby of Holloway Global Logistics was silent except for the soft hum of the floor buffer. It was almost midnight. Nancy pushed her cart past the marble front desk, humming quietly to herself, when a voice she did not expect broke through the stillness. "Excusez-moi, madame. Pouvez-vous m'aider?" A tall, tired-looking delivery driver stood near the glass doors, holding a clipboard, clearly lost and speaking rapid French. Without even looking up, Nancy answered him smoothly in his own language, telling him exactly which loading dock he needed and how to get there. The man's face lit up with relief. He thanked her and hurried off. What Nancy did not know was that someone else was still in the building. Braden Holloway, the CEO of the company his grandfather had founded, was standing quietly by the elevator, phone forgotten in his hand. He had just watched the woman who mopped his floors every night speak flawless French to a stranger, as easily as most people ordered coffee. Braden opened his mouth to say something, but before he could, another visitor rushed through the doors, this time speaking urgent, panicked Mandarin. Nancy turned toward the man immediately, calm as still water, and answered him in perfect Mandarin too, guiding him toward the right elevator bank. Braden's jaw dropped. He had run this company for 6 years. He had hired people with fancy degrees from expensive schools who could barely order lunch in a second language. And here was a woman in a gray uniform, a mop in one hand, switching between French and Mandarin like flipping a light switch. "Excuse me," Braden finally said, stepping out from the shadows near the elevator. Nancy turned, startled to see the CEO standing there at this hour. She quickly straightened her uniform, embarrassed, as if she had done something wrong. "Mr. Holloway, I'm sorry, sir. I didn't realize anyone else was still here." "Don't apologize," Braden said, his voice full of disbelief. "How many languages do you speak?" Nancy hesitated, unsure if this was a trick question or if she was in trouble for talking to visitors instead of just cleaning. "9, sir," she said quietly, "including English." Braden stared at her for a long moment, the kind of silence that makes a person's heart pound, wondering what will happen next. Then he said the words that would change everything. "Come to my office tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock sharp. I want to talk to you." Nancy's stomach dropped. In the 14 years she had worked the night shift at Holloway Global, no CEO had ever asked to speak with her. Not once. She barely slept that night, tossing and turning, wondering if she was about to lose the only job that had kept a roof over her daughter's head. But what happened in that office the next morning was something nobody in the building could have imagined. And it was only the beginning of a story that would turn the entire company upside down. Before we continue, let us know in the comment section where in the world you're tuning in from. We love seeing how far our stories reach. And if this story speaks to you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. 10 years earlier, Nancy's life had looked very different. She had been a graduate student, working hard on her master's degree in linguistics at a university 2 hours from where she now lived. She loved languages the way some people loved music. Every new word felt like a small treasure. She had dreams of becoming a translator for the United Nations one day, helping people from different countries understand each other. Then her daughter, Delilah, was born. Delilah's father left before Delilah's first birthday, and Nancy was suddenly alone, with a baby to feed and a mountain of bills. She dropped out of her program just 1 semester before finishing her degree. It broke her heart, but she told herself it was temporary. She would go back one day. One day never came. Instead, Nancy took the first steady job she could find, night janitor at Holloway Global Logistics. It paid the bills. It gave Delilah a safe home. And slowly, year after year, Nancy's dream of finishing her degree faded into the background, buried under diapers, school lunches, and double shifts. But Nancy never stopped loving languages. On her breaks, She read old textbooks she had kept from college. She listened to foreign radio stations through cheap earbuds while mopping the floors of the massive lobby. She practiced with anyone who crossed her path: security guards from Nigeria who spoke Yoruba, cafeteria workers who spoke Tagalog, even lost tourists who wandered into the building looking for directions. Nobody in the office ever noticed. To most people, Nancy was invisible, just the woman who kept the floors clean and the trash bins empty. Nobody, that is, until the night Braden Halloway happened to still be in the building. The next morning, Nancy stood outside Braden's office door in her cleaning uniform, feeling completely out of place among the sharp suits and polished shoes of the executive floor. She smoothed her hair nervously and knocked. "Come in," Braden called. Inside, Braden sat behind a large glass desk, and beside him stood his assistant, a sharp young man named Patrick, holding a tablet and looking slightly confused about why a janitor had been called up to the executive suite. "Please, sit down," Braden said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Nancy sat carefully, hands folded in her lap. "Tell me your story," Braden said simply. "All of it." So Nancy did. She told him about her love of language, about her almost finished master's degree, about Delilah, about the sacrifices she had made. She told him how she used to dream of working for international organizations, helping people understand one another across oceans and cultures. As she spoke, Braden leaned forward, completely absorbed, as though he was hearing the most fascinating story of his life. When she finished, the office was silent for a moment. "Do you realize," Braden finally said, "that this company loses hundreds of thousands of dollars every year because of translation mistakes and miscommunication with our overseas partners? We have an entire department of consultants who charge us a fortune, and half the time, they still get it wrong." Nancy blinked, unsure where this was going. "I want to create a new position," Braden continued. "Cultural liaison for international affairs. You would work directly with our overseas clients, review our contracts for cultural and language errors, and help train our teams on how to communicate properly with partners around the world." Nancy's mouth fell open. "Mr. Halloway, I don't have a college degree. I never finished. I don't have any experience in an office like this." "You have something most of my executives don't have," Braden said firmly. "Real skill, real understanding, and a decade of experience listening to people, truly listening, in ways a diploma can't teach." Patrick, standing off to the side, shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsure if his boss had lost his mind. Nancy sat frozen, her heart pounding so loud she was sure they could hear it. This felt like a dream she might wake up from at any second. Could this really be happening? After all these years of mopping floors in silence, was someone finally about to see her? "I'll need to bring this to the board," Braden added, standing up and walking toward the window. "Some of them won't like it, but I don't care. This is happening." He turned back to face her. His expression was completely certain. "Nancy, welcome to the executive team." Nancy opened her mouth to respond, but at that exact moment, the office door burst open without a knock. A tall, silver-haired man stormed in, his face red with anger, a folder clutched tightly in his hand. It was Henry, the company's longest-serving board member, and the look on his face told Nancy that her battle was only just beginning. Henry did not even look at Nancy at first. He marched straight up to Braden's desk and slammed the folder down so hard that Patrick jumped. "Is it true?" Henry demanded. "Is it true that you pulled a janitor off the cleaning crew and are about to hand her an executive title?" Braden did not flinch. "Good morning to you too, Henry." "Don't good morning me." Henry's eyes flicked toward Nancy, sizing her up like she was a problem to be solved rather than a person in the room. "This is a joke, right? Tell me this is some kind of joke." "It's not a joke," Braden said calmly. "This is Nancy. She speaks 9 languages fluently. Last night, in our own lobby, she helped 2 lost visitors in French and Mandarin without missing a beat. Meanwhile, our translation consultants cost us over $300,000 last year and still managed to send the wrong shipping terms to our partners in Seoul." Henry's jaw tightened. Credentials matter, Braden. Degrees matter. Experience in a corporate environment matters. You cannot simply pluck someone off a mop bucket and put her behind a desk with executives who have MBAs from top universities. The words stung, but Nancy kept her face still. She had heard worse. She had learned long ago that some people would never see past the uniform. "She has a background in linguistics," Braden said. "She was 1 semester away from a master's degree before life got in the way." "1 semester away is not a degree," Henry snapped. "This is reckless. The board will hear about this." "Good," Braden said, "because I was going to tell them myself, this afternoon." Henry stared at him, stunned by the confidence in his voice. Then he turned on his heel and stormed out, the door swinging shut behind him, with a bang that echoed down the hallway. The office went quiet. Nancy realized she had been holding her breath the whole time. "I'm sorry you had to see that," Braden said, sitting back down. "Henry has been on this board since before I was born. He built half this company's early client relationships. But he does not understand what I saw in that lobby last night." Nancy folded her hands tightly in her lap. "Maybe he's right, Mr. Holloway. Maybe this is too big a jump." "No," Braden said firmly. "It's exactly the right jump. Give it 30 days. If you can prove what I already know, that you belong in that boardroom, then no one will be able to argue with results." Nancy took a deep breath. 30 days. She thought of Delilah at home, asleep before her late shifts, dreaming her own dreams. She thought of the linguistics books gathering dust on her shelf. Maybe this was her chance to finally use everything she had buried for so long. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll do it." The first 2 weeks were harder than Nancy expected. She was given a small office on the 9th floor, tucked between the supply closet and the fire stairs, as if someone wanted to remind her she still did not quite belong. Some of her new co-workers were kind. A few, mostly the younger staff, were curious and even excited to meet her. But many others simply stared, whispered, and turned away when she walked past. She overheard someone in the break room say, "I heard she used to empty our trash cans." Someone else laughed and said, "Guess anyone can get promoted these days." Nancy said nothing. She went back to her small office, closed the door, and got to work. Her first task was reviewing a stalled shipping contract with a manufacturing partner in Guangzhou. The deal had been stuck for 6 months, with both sides accusing the other of breaking promises. Nancy read through the paperwork line by line, in both English and Mandarin, and found the problem within an hour. A translator years earlier had used the wrong word for a delivery deadline, one that meant flexible in casual conversation, but implied something legally binding in formal Mandarin business writing. The Chinese partners believed Holloway Global had broken a firm promise. It was never a matter of bad faith. It was a matter of one wrong word. Nancy drafted a respectful letter in Mandarin, explaining the misunderstanding and offering a new, clearer agreement. Within 3 days, the partner responded, relieved and ready to move forward. The deal that had been frozen for half a year was suddenly back on track. Braden could hardly believe it when he heard the news. He called Nancy into his office, grinning from ear to ear. "Do you understand what you just did?" he said. "That contract was worth $2.4 million. Everyone thought it was dead." Nancy allowed herself a small, proud smile. It wasn't dead. It was just misunderstood. Word began to spread through the building. Slowly, the whispers in the break room started to shift. A few people even stopped by her small office to say congratulations. Patrick, who had once looked at her with confusion, now brought her coffee before their morning meetings, calling her the miracle worker with a grin. But not everyone was impressed. 3 weeks into her new role, Nancy was asked to sit in on a major client call with a logistics partner from Mexico City. The deal was worth even more than the Guangzhou contract, and tensions were high after months of stalled negotiations. Braden wanted Nancy in the room, believing her fluency in Spanish and her understanding of cultural nuance could finally smooth things over. The call started well. Nancy translated smoothly, catching small cultural details that had been lost before, phrases that sounded polite in English but came across as cold or dismissive in Spanish business culture. The clients on the other end of the line visibly relaxed, warming up for the first time in months. Then, halfway through the meeting, the conference room door opened. Henry walked in, uninvited, and took a seat at the head of the table, directly across from Nancy. He said nothing at first, simply watching, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Nancy felt her stomach tighten but kept her focus on the call, translating carefully as the Mexico City team outlined their proposed terms. Just as the deal seemed to be reaching a breakthrough, Henry leaned forward and interrupted, speaking directly to the clients in slow, halting Spanish, clearly trying to prove a point. But his Spanish was clumsy and full of small mistakes that, this time, were not harmless. He accidentally used a phrase that, in the client's region, was considered deeply disrespectful, implying that Holloway Global did not trust the other company's word. The line went silent. Nancy watched the color drain from the faces of everyone on the video screen. The lead negotiator from Mexico City folded her arms, her expression turning cold and guarded. "We need a moment," the woman said sharply, and the call disconnected. The room fell into stunned silence. Braden turned toward Henry, his face pale with disbelief. Patrick sat frozen, unsure what to do. And Henry, for the first time since Nancy had met him, looked completely unsure of himself. The multi-million-dollar deal that had taken weeks to rebuild had just collapsed in front of everyone, and all eyes in the room slowly turned toward Nancy, waiting to see if there was any way left to save it. For a long moment, nobody in the room moved. The dead silence of the disconnected call hung heavy in the air, and Henry sat frozen, realizing too late what his careless words had done. Braden turned to Nancy, his eyes pleading, "Can you fix this?" Nancy did not answer right away. Instead, she picked up the phone on the conference table and dialed the number back herself. Patrick opened his mouth to stop her, worried it might make things worse, but Braden held up a hand, silently telling him to wait. The line rang twice before the Mexico City negotiator picked up, her voice clipped and cool. "Yes?" Nancy spoke gently in Spanish, not defending the company, not making excuses. Instead, she acknowledged the disrespect in the words that had been used, explained that it came from a place of misunderstanding rather than true intention, and asked for the chance to rebuild trust the right way, starting with an honest apology. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then the woman's voice softened, just slightly. "You are the one who wrote the letter about the Guangzhou contract, yes? Someone mentioned your name to us." "Yes," Nancy said. "That was me." Another pause. "Very well. We will speak again tomorrow. But this time, only with you in the room." The call ended, and Nancy set the phone down gently. The room let out a collective breath. Braden stared at her, stunned. "You just saved a $4 million deal with one phone call." Henry said nothing. He simply stood, gathered his folder, and walked out of the room without a word. But Nancy knew this was far from over. The next morning, Nancy was called into the main boardroom, the one she had cleaned so many times in the dead of night, never once imagining she would sit at its long table as anything other than the woman with the mop and bucket. This time, every seat was filled. Every board member was watching her closely, whispering among themselves. Henry stood at the front of the room, a stack of papers in his hand. "I've called this meeting," Henry began, "because I believe this company's decision-making process has been compromised. We have promoted an employee with no college degree, no formal business experience, and no prior standing within this organization into one of the most sensitive executive roles we have. Yesterday's incident is proof that unqualified leadership creates unnecessary risk." Nancy sat quietly, her hands folded on the table, refusing to let her nerves show on her face. She noticed Braden shift in his seat, ready to defend her, but she gave him a small, steady look. This was her fight, and she needed to stand in it herself. "May I speak?" Nancy asked. Henry hesitated, clearly not expecting her to respond directly, then gave a stiff nod. Nancy stood slowly and looked around the table at the row of unfamiliar, skeptical faces. "You're right that I don't have a degree hanging on my wall," she began. "I was one semester away from finishing my master's in linguistics when my daughter was born and her father left. I had a choice to make. I could chase a piece of paper, or I could make sure my daughter had food on the table and a roof over her head. I chose her. I don't regret that choice for a single day." The room was silent, listening. "For 14 years, I cleaned the floors of this building at night," she continued. "While I mopped, I listened. I listened to delivery drivers speaking French, to security guards speaking Yoruba, to executives on late-night calls speaking Mandarin and Portuguese and German. I never stopped learning, even when nobody was watching, especially when nobody was watching." She looked directly at Henry now. "Yesterday, a deal fell apart because of one misunderstood word. Today, I sit here because I know how many words like that have cost this company money, trust, and relationships over the years. I did not ask for this role. It was offered to me because of what I can do, not because of what's written on a diploma. If you want to judge me on results." Henry stared back at her, his jaw tight, unwilling to back down completely. "Results are not enough to justify placing untested leadership into permanent executive positions." "Then test me properly," Nancy said calmly. "Give me 90 days. Track every contract I touch, every client relationship I help repair, every dollar saved or earned. If I fail to prove my worth by the numbers, I will step down myself. No argument, no hard feelings." A murmur rippled through the boardroom. Several board members exchanged glances, clearly impressed by her steady confidence. Braden stood. "I'll second that agreement. 90 days. Full transparency, tracked by our finance department, not opinions." Henry looked around the table, sensing the room shifting away from him. Finally, he gave a short, reluctant nod. 90 days, he agreed. "Then we vote." The next 90 days tested Nancy in ways she never imagined. She worked long hours, reviewing contracts in 5 different languages, sitting in on calls across 9 time zones, and training junior staff on cultural communication mistakes that had quietly been costing the company money for years. She rebuilt the relationship with the Mexico City partners so successfully that they signed an even larger contract than originally planned. She caught 2 more costly translation errors buried in older agreements with partners in Germany and Brazil, saving the company nearly $1 million combined. Slowly, the whispers in the break room changed completely. People no longer spoke of the janitor who got lucky. They spoke of the woman who saved 3 major deals in 1 quarter. Patrick became one of her strongest supporters, often staying late to help organize her reports for the board. Even some employees who had once doubted her began stopping by her office, not to gossip, but to ask for her advice on handling international clients. On the 90th day, the board gathered once more. This time, the mood in the room was different. Finance had prepared a full report, and the numbers spoke for themselves. Deals saved, money recovered, new contracts signed, and client relationships repaired that had been broken for years. Henry stood slowly when it was his turn to speak. For a long moment, he said nothing, simply staring at the report in his hands. "I was wrong," he finally said, his voice quieter than Nancy had ever heard it. "I judged you by where you came from, not by what you were capable of. That was a mistake, and I owe you an apology." Nancy nodded, accepting his words with grace. "Thank you, Henry. That means more than you know." The board voted unanimously to make her position permanent. That evening, Braden called Nancy into his office one final time. The sun was setting outside the tall windows, casting a warm golden light across the room. "I've been thinking," Braden said, "about how many other people like you might be working in this building right now. People with hidden talents nobody has bothered to notice." Nancy smiled softly. "There are probably more than you think." "That's exactly why," Braden continued. "I'm launching a new company-wide program. We're calling it Hidden Talent Initiative. Every department, every level of this company will have the chance to be seen for skills beyond their job title. No more overlooking people simply because of where they started." Nancy felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, thinking of all the years she had felt invisible, mopping floors in silence while dreaming of a life she thought she had lost forever. "Delilah is going to be so proud," she whispered. "She should be," Braden said. "Her mother changed an entire company just by being seen." Word of Nancy's journey spread far beyond the walls of Holloway Global Logistics. Employees at every level began to feel a little braver about sharing their own hidden skills and stories. And somewhere in that towering office building, in a small office no longer tucked away and forgotten, Nancy sat down at her desk, opened her laptop, and got back to work. No longer invisible, finally seen for exactly who she had always been.